Okay, and we are live. Good morning. We are live on YouTube. Welcome to today's webinar on From Control to Coaching, specifically for managers and engaging in a different way because the market now requires it. So give me a minute. All right, so here we go. Jumping back on track. I'm Dr. Mayra Austin. I'm your host today, and I come from a company called Management Cues, and we specialize in providing a unique approach to training. We track while in training, augmenting the training experience and giving our managers real insights on what they do and how they're doing it, and also their own development and growth. And in addition to that, we're proven and tested to work. We have a neuroscience backing through a company called Neuron, who has tested our training effectiveness, and you can always check out those results on our website. So, with that said, let's go ahead and dive in this morning. So, today we're going to cover designing controls versus being controlling, which is a common misconception in the workforce. I think not just specific to managers, but in general. And what is controlling as a function of management in the workforce? There are 5 functions to effective management, and controlling is one of them. And so we're going to make those distinctions. We're going to talk about what is coaching in the workforce and what does it look like different from coaching in sports, for example. We're going to talk about the cost of controlling behavior and how that actually works against you. We'll talk about the characteristics of a coaching manager and the difference and what the expectations are around that. We'll talk about common managerial traps and how we can sometimes get stuck because we're not balancing all of the different types of influence that we have in the workplace. And then we'll talk through some coaching conversations, how to really focus on creating a culture of coaching, and management tools that you can use to make that easier and continuously improve. And with that, we'll then close out and go through some takeaways. So here we go. So, to start, the role of manager has evolved and continues to evolve with the changing workforce. So, interesting enough, the concept of management hasn't been around forever, but it has been around for a long time. And so, management as a formal process, as a formal area of instruction, has really taken has come to life since the industrial age. So I'm talking about the late 1800s to mid 1900s. And the reason why I think this piece of information is particularly important is because things have evolved, things have changed, and the scope of what takes place in the workforce has also. And so during this era, when management was still new and fresh and it meant something different, managers served as authoritative figures. And so their role encompassed enforcing rules, controlling output, and optimizing processes for efficiency. And the reason that was such a large focus was because it was the age of industrialization. And so it was the first time that people were entering the workforce in large numbers, leaving farms, leaving different rural types of work that they were doing that didn't require large groups of people to be managed. And so it's important to recognize that's how it came to be, was because the need was there. And so today's managers are living in a different type of environment. So today's managers are really expected to coach rather than command, to influence rather than impose, to empower rather than control. And so this is a shift. This is a significant shift from the days when management first started. And so this shift reflects modern workforce needs, including purpose for their work, autonomy in how they operate, opportunities for growth and development, psychological safety to take risks and to learn. And so what they need from us, what the workforce needs from us has significantly evolved. And so that's why we're feeling that strain and shift as we're working and engaging with generations at different levels and from different times, right? There's a big shift there. So why is this shift so significant? Why is the shift happening from control to coaching now? So the reason why is because we've had specific things take place historically in the business space and in just the field of leadership and management. So there's been a rise of knowledge in the economy. So information, knowledge, education is now more largely accessible than it has ever been. And technological advancements make it so that we're collaborating, we're engaging, we're completing projects differently. Workforce expectations have changed because of these things. The young professionals coming into the workforce, their expectation is different. Their expectation is geared towards purpose and meaning versus just completing the job. And to be quite honest, in the workforce, we don't find the same type of stability that prior generations did, right? There's no more pensions. There's no more, different types of retirement that you work towards for stability for your family. Our family's dynamics have changed. So all of this is true. Globalization and complexity. The world has gotten closer, but also more complex. And mental health and well-being has become a focal point in how we engage with other people and for how long, right? And what that actually does to us because we have more information around things like neuroscience, around things like stress, around things like psychological safety. Their research in organizational science has taken a leap. And now that we understand things like organizational behavior and what causes friction, what causes us to perform, what motivates us, also very closely aligned with neuroscience. COVID-19 and remote work acceleration completely pivoted us in a time of emergency to work very differently than we had in the past. And so that put pressure on areas or management and leadership muscles that we had not put into practice. And so that's where we're feeling a strain, and that's where the need from control to coaching is coming from. Okay, so let's continue on. So being controlling versus setting controls. So this is an area that I like to spend a lot of time with when I'm personally training managers because there is a degree of influence, there is a degree of authority that comes with management. And we have to be careful and responsible with that to not take it to the point where it's controlling people, right? So the controlling function in management isn't referring to being controlling. It's referring to organizational control and keeping things in order so that it's easy to work, really so that we can work through and problem solve and focus on what we need to focus on. So that's really where that's coming from. And so here are some examples, right? Somebody who is controlling is limiting autonomy, is focusing on compliance over collaboration, is avoiding delegation, is micromanaging. Somebody who is focusing on designing controls and making sure the environment is in check and in control is monitoring, is implementing performance management effectively, is setting clear objectives. And so those are some distinctions and some examples, but we can go on and on as to these different components. And so what you want to do as a manager is just check against yourself, right? Are you being controlling or are you designing effective controls? So what is controlling in the workforce? So to take it a step further, when we are controlling in the workforce, we have very specific outcomes. And typically they look like this. We micromanage tasks, we avoid delegation, we focus on compliance over collaboration, we limit autonomy, we lead with fear and intimidation, which means that really we let that authoritative function or part of what the type of influence that we have in the workforce take over. We suppress feedback. We only measure value based on widgets completed or volume or tasks done. We avoid transparency. We resist change, and we stay within a controlling type of relationship. So when you're focusing on that type of an exchange, you have, again, very specific outcomes. So what does it look like when you're coaching in the workforce? So when you're coaching in the workforce, again, the outcomes are expected, but they're quite different from the controlling outcomes. So when you're coaching in the workforce, you're building trust and psychological safety. You're asking powerful, open-ended questions. You're listening actively without judgment. You're trying to be curious and understand and explore versus designate blame, for example. You're empowering autonomy and ownership. You're providing ongoing feedback and development, and you're leading with empathy and curiosity. So when we're not leading with empathy and curiosity in our head, we're saying this feels like babysitting. Or we're saying, why do I care? Right? Even if you don't verbally say it, and sometimes we verbally say it, but that's what it looks like when we're not doing that. We're focusing on strengths and potential. We're collaborating, not dictating. And we're guiding rather than just focusing on controlling. So it's creating accountability through clarity, right? We create the response based on how clear the person is and to get their buy-in that way. So, what are the costs of controlling behavior? So, there are some pretty hefty business costs when it comes to controlling behavior. High turnover and talent loss is one of the most expensive, and HR can absolutely support that with figures in on your end as case studies as to how much it actually costs. But low engagement and motivation, bottlenecks and slowed productivity, burnout for both the manager and the team, damaged relationships and poor team culture, resistance to feedback and growth, manager reputation and career impact, and compliance without commitment. And the reason why that's important, especially the last one, compliance without commitment, is when we have team members that are just checking boxes so that you won't nag them or that you won't micromanage them, they're not really taking the time to understand the importance and how it's connected to larger organizational goals. So it becomes about just checking that box and moving on versus understanding what positive or negative impact really looks like and their own contribution within it. So that's what's really going on when that happens. And it's a massive cost. It's a massive, massive cost. So here are some characteristics of coaching, right? So a coach will ask, not tell, right? So using open-ended questions to spark reflection, insight, and problem solving, providing constructive feedback. So this is giving timely, respectful feedback aimed at helping others grow and improve. So this is real time type of exchanges. You're modeling accountability, holding yourself and others accountable with clarity and consistency, not control, right? So your focus is creating higher influence through your example, not because you're telling them to do something. And then you're collaborative. So you value input with others, you co-create solutions, and you share decision making with the appropriate team members. And you're adaptable. You're adjusting coaching style to fit the needs, learning styles, and goals of each team member. You're an active listener. So you're giving full attention. You're making sure that people understand, not just saying it and moving on. You're empathetic. So you're understanding and acknowledging emotions, perspectives, and challenges of the team member. You're putting yourself in their shoes, right? That's really what that empathy looks like. Growth oriented. You're focusing on developing people, not just achieving tasks, and continuous learning. So that's really what it looks like to have a growth mindset, not just pushing growth on people, right? It's growing and we're doing it together. You're a trust builder. You're creating psychological safety. You're making it easy to fall forward, to make mistakes and learn from it and move forward. And you don't place judgment, right? And so sometimes judgment in the workforce can look like that was dumb, or why'd you do that? That doesn't make sense, right? That's having that kind of judgmental type of approach versus a coaching approach where you're looking at what is the teachable moment in that fail in that opportunity or mistake. empowers autonomy. So that's trusting the team to take things on, to take some risk and letting them make decisions around things, right? So it's you as a manager thinking about what could they make some decisions around so that I give them some autonomy, but also some responsibility that they can learn from, right? So that's the coaching mindset versus saying, I'm the boss, I'm going to make the decisions, right? That's the old school way of managing, right? Coaching is really quite the opposite. So here are some common managerial traps and how to flip them around. So these common traps I've witnessed in the workforce for over 2 decades, right? Which I have over 2 decades of experience managing and leading operations. And so these areas come up often, and if not often, then even daily, depending on what the environment is like. So here's the trap: needing to know everything as a manager. That's controlling behavior. So the manager believes they must have all the answers. I'm sorry to break it to you, but nobody has all the answers. And as a manager, setting yourself up that way is unrealistic. So here's how you flip that, right? You ask instead of telling. You trust the team's knowledge and ask open ended questions to spark insight and ownership. So it's having an exploratory approach to everything because there's an opportunity in everything for them or for you. And sometimes we learn more by being curious than we do by trying to control that aspect of our role. So here's another trap: solving every problem, right? Similar to the first one, you don't have the answers for everything and you shouldn't. So the controlling behavior is the manager immediately jumping in to fix issues for the team versus bringing the team together and guiding, coaching for clarity, showing them how to solve problems, and helping them reflect, prioritize, and act. Every time there is an issue, it's an opportunity for people to align, to learn how to collaborate, to acquire skill, and then solve with multiple lenses around the table that could come up with an even better solution. So that's the trap, is thinking that because you're the manager, because you're leading, you have to solve everything, which is a trap we all fall into. So it's just important to note those areas. So here's another one: micromanaging tasks. So the controlling behavior there for managers is overseeing every step, often redoing work or dictating how it's done, right? So it's you being able to see that delegation with support is the long-term solution, right? You sitting there managing every step is not effective management. It's ineffective management, and it's a poor use of your time based on the experience and talent that you have, and which is likely the reason you're in a management or leadership role. So you want to delegate with support, you want to set clear expectations, then step back and allow autonomy with check-ins, not takeovers. So you still want to monitor, you just don't want to micromanage, right? So the distinction between those comes up in discussion oftentimes in our sessions, which is really, really fun to explore. But monitoring is setting up check-ins along the way, not checking every step. That's micromanaging, right? And it's paying attention more to the outcomes, not necessarily how they got there, but that they got to the right place, and the quality of the work, right? Those are the distinctions there, and makes better use of your time and allows them to actually learn and grow. So here's another trap: equating control with accountability. So the controlling behavior for the manager there is using pressures or surveillance to drive performance, right? So the flip side of that is creating agreements, not control, right? Get buy-in with your team members by agreeing on what success looks like. And that's setting mutual goals, following up, and sharing accountability and regular feedback, right? So that's lending to higher impact versus just completing widgets, right? That's the push is a slightly different. So the trap of avoiding vulnerability. So again, because we're in a position of management or leadership, there is some authority within that influence. And so we have to acknowledge it, but we also have to not be so consumed by it that we lack vulnerability or we fail to show it. So the controlling behavior there is a manager leading with authority that's avoiding admitting mistakes or uncertainty. And so the model of openness is really what makes a more effective manager and leader and a better coach. It's showing humility, inviting input, and demonstrating learning as a strength, right? And so that exchange is what creates that level playing field. Hoarding information, another trap. So the controlling behavior there for the manager is withholding context or decisions to maintain authority. The flip side of it is sharing transparently. It's equipping the teams with information that they need to make informed, empowered decisions, right? So it's laying it out on the table, and showing that you're okay with it being transparent, that we're here to solve, versus holding decisions and only relying on your own input or information. And sometimes, especially if you're managing large teams, you're not going to have insight into everything or visibility. And so this approach to creating transparency allows you to actually solve more effectively, ultimately setting everyone up for success, including yourself. And so I think that those are some key things there. So the trap and the fear of letting go. So this comes up often, especially when we're training for delegation. And so delegation, done effectively, is a great tool and skill for managers to have. When managers do it poorly, they can even create a toxic environment through it. And it's actually called toxic delegation. So if you've never heard of it, check it out, Google it. We offer training around toxic delegation as well, because there is a significant detriment to not doing it right. So the controlling behavior for a manager around delegation, or the fear of letting go, is hesitating to let others lead or experiment due to fear of failure, right? And so that needs to be managed, because there is no other way to grow than to make mistakes and practice, right? So the flip of that, the flip side, is building safe to fail spaces, encourage learning through action, knowing that mistakes are part of growth, right? It's not in spite of the journey, it's part of the journey. And if they're managed effectively with safety around it, it happens much faster. So they get past the mistakes much faster. They learn at a much faster pace. They retain the lesson at a higher rate when it's safe to do so. So building a coaching culture. So, creating a bigger picture within your department, within your company, takes a big degree of awareness from managers and leaders. And so you want to lead by example. You want to shift from telling to asking. You want to integrate coaching into your daily workflow. You want to provide tools and training around coaching, how to receive it and how to do it. There's two sides to that, right? You want to set coaching based goals so that coaching becomes part of how we perform, right? If you don't have coaching based goals, then you're not going to be able to create a culture in which people understand that relationship or are even familiar with it. And we have to acknowledge that as people, not all of us have had positive reinforcing relationships in our lives, either personally or professionally. And so this could be the opportunity to sync that up and bring some awareness, and insights into people's lives in terms of relating to one another. So you want to build psychological safety, again, falling forward, using mistakes and failure as an opportunity to do better, but also learn. And then you want to recognize and reward coaching behaviors for the same reason that you want to set coach based behaviors, because you want it to be something that permeates in the organization that everybody can relate to. And that, of course, adds to the safety. You want to align values with coaching principles and provide ongoing development for managers. So if you are a manager, continue to work on these skills, because they're not easy to master and they take practice to get better. And you want to be consistent and patient. Learning takes patience. And I can tell you from experience, patience is not my virtue. I had to discipline that muscle and understand why it was so important and how it lent to both my success and the success of others. And once I made that connection and it meant something to me, things really began to move at a much faster pace. So management tools. So there are plenty of tools in the world. We provide tons of tools at Management Cues, but they don't have to come from Management Cues. These are tools that you have to have in your, what I call tool belt when I'm training with managers, right? Things that you can rely on and pull out quickly and use in teachable moments or for yourself to keep you accountable. So one-on-one coaching templates are great to help you frame your thinking and to execute conversations in a coaching way. Eventually, you won't need those templates, but if it's not a muscle or if in your environment there's a need for coaching, it's a great tool to use. Powerful questions playbook. You can actually create a playbook of questions that come up in your environment commonly and start to think in that curious type of way. It helps you also remember that a lot of the times newer team members or team members who struggle come across the same types of questions or issues. And so creating a playbook can help you with all of the future generations you manage. And feedback frameworks, using models that are designed for feedback that's effective and that's executed in the right way. An SBI model could be one of those. And if you haven't heard of it, Google it, check it out. And then a management reflection journal. So I use this with managers. It's worked and it's neuroscience backed as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But using reflection journals specifically for the management experiences that you are having or new managers are having are incredibly effective. And I'll explain why in a minute, but they're also super cheap. They're not necessarily an expensive tool and it could lend to your success. Creating a coaching log, tracking how often you're coaching and how you're coaching and what's coming up in coaching dialogue. Those things help you become more effective pretty quickly because you start to pick up on trends and you start to pick up on insights about yourself and others. We have a Management Cues management planner, which is designed for managers to incorporate their leadership and management functions into the way that they operate in day to day. Also, very inexpensive tool. It's like $24. But it helps you guide a day-to-day type of reflection, which really helps with your retention, but also with that coaching muscle. And then 360 degree feedback reviews. Those reviews are reviews that your peers do on you as a manager or a leader. And that helps you really gain insight into, are you being effective, right? Are you really incorporating coaching versus controlling? Has that distinction played out along with other areas of your management? And then quick surveys. I recommend if you're looking to create a culture of coaching or a culture that's more impactful and connected across different team members, to provide pulse surveys, which can also be referred to as quick surveys that are topic based, right? So in this instance, since we're talking about coaching, maybe it's a coaching survey that you're providing and asking 3 to 5 questions, no more than that, and make it anonymous so that your team feels safe in participating. You could also do this type of qualitative survey where you're asking the questions in group meetings or in your check-ins to see what is working and what isn't, and really dial that in. And last but not least, blocking out time for coaching is something that should be done with your team members. It's harder if you have a larger team, and so maybe the other tools are more effective for larger teams. But if you have a team of, I would say from 1 to maybe 7 or 10 team members, blocking out time for coaching is really effective and is going to lend to much quicker returns for you. So those are some management tools. So as we talked about journaling, I wanted to focus in on that just a little bit for this coaching piece, this coaching webinar, because it's so effective and it's cheap, it's easy. Almost everybody can do it. It's very quickly to structure around it. So the power of journaling for managers through a neuroscience lens. So it's not just about pouring out your feelings, right? There's so much more to it. Journaling isn't just a feel-good activity. It's a brain-based strategy for smarter, more effective management. So from a neuroscience perspective, journaling actually activates areas of the brain that are involved in self-regulation, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. So it helps us be better leaders. And in terms of coaching, it helps us be better coaches. So here's a prompt for you to take away, right? A 5-minute neuro journaling prompt. So literally 5 minutes. This is something you can do for yourself next time that you're trying to coach or in participating in a coaching activity. Do this at the end of the day and ask yourself and answer in your journal what went well today and why. When did I feel tension and stress? What triggered it? What am I proud of? And what did I learn? What's one thing I can do differently tomorrow? This really kind of rounds out your experiences and puts you in a position of higher capacity to lead. So the bottom line is this. The bottom line is that journaling isn't introspection, it's neuro training. And so there's a degree of sophistication to journaling. And if you have structured prompts around it, it's even more effective. It's how managers build the mental muscle for clarity, resilience, and strategic leadership. And so this is just something that is not just helpful for you, but for the entire team that you're operating in. Okay, so with that said, I'll open it on YouTube here for some Q&A for any of our live stream watchers for a second. And then any questions that could come in chat. And I think we're good to move on. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me and we can absolutely answer those for you. And so as part of joining us today, you'll be getting a copy of the webinar deck. You're going to be getting access to information around our trainings that are available online, our management planner, our neuroscience studies. Any of this is to support you in your growth. So if you're curious about any of it, and we always provide free consultations. So if you're curious about anything, please feel free to schedule some time with us. And as an added bonus, we're adding a 20% discount for both our management reflection journal and our management planner, code COACH. And last but certainly not least, we invite you to participate in our I Fund Women supported by Honeycomb Credit crowdfunding campaign right now. We're looking to scale. And so we appreciate any contributions as we try to take on the world with our unique training approach. All right, so with that said, thank you so much. Feel free to check us out at www.managementcues.org or visit any of our handles at Management Cues. And with that said, I thank you so much for joining me this morning. Have an amazing rest of your week.